Pennsylvania Republicans have asked the U.S. Supreme Court to get involved in their effort to suppress voters. Welcome back to Democracy Docket on YouTube. I'm Mark Elias. Let's get started.
Mark, tell us exactly what Pennsylvania Republicans are suing over.
Okay, so you're not going to believe this, but President Biden issued an executive order that directs federal agencies to promote voter registration. Now, you'd think this would not be a particularly controversial thing. I mean, like, who's against the government promoting voter registration? Well, I'll tell you who, the Republicans, because they went to court to argue that this executive order somehow usurps their authority under the now discredited independent state legislature theory. That somehow the president of the United States saying, hey, federal government, do what you can to help people register to vote, that somehow that encroaches on their state legislative power. Now, they are also challenging a policy that the governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, instituted that institutes some additional forms of automatic voter registration at the Department of Motor Vehicles in Pennsylvania. Again, who the hell would be against this? I'll tell you who, the vote-suppressing Republicans in Pennsylvania.
You mentioned that Republicans are using the rejected independent state legislature theory. Mark, just remind us, what does that theory argue and what did the Supreme Court already say about it?
Right. So this is very important for people to pay attention to, because throughout this series and a lot of content on Democracy Docket, you're going to see reference to ISL, or independent state legislature theory. And this is a fringe right-wing theory that has still never been adopted by any court. But what they want to argue is that only state legislatures can set policy for voting in federal elections, although they've got a little bit of a problem there because the provision they rely on also says that Congress can. But most importantly, they say there is no role for governors, there's no role for state judges, there's no role to apply state constitutions in overseeing statutes that are passed. And in states like Michigan, there's no role of ballot initiatives, that states can't expand voting rights through the ballot initiative process. So it's a very extreme theory that would basically make state legislatures all powerful, subject basically to no review, subject maybe not even to a governor's veto. And that's what ISL is. This theory went up to the U.S. Supreme Court last term in Moore v. Harper. That was the redistricting case out of North Carolina. And to many people's surprise, it was rejected. I mean, I wasn't surprised because, I said all along it was a fringe theory that would never be adopted. But it was rejected by this conservative Supreme Court in Moore v. Harper. But here's the thing, Paige. Republicans are not done peddling this theory. As we oftentimes see, if at first they don't succeed, they try again. And they are trying to find another vehicle for the U.S. Supreme Court to, in their view, reconsider this fringe theory. And so that's what we're seeing in Pennsylvania.
Right. The Pennsylvania Republicans are basically arguing that these executive actions by Biden and Shapiro violate the Electors Clause of the U.S. Constitution, but the district court dismissed their lawsuit for lack of standing. The district court basically said, Republican lawmakers, you're suing like you're acting on behalf of the whole state legislature, but you're not. You're just a group of individual lawmakers, and individual lawmakers do not have standing. Now, the Republicans have appealed to SCOTUS to ask them to intervene and grant them standing. Mark, what do you make of that argument? Do you think that there's any merit to it? Is it valid? What's your take?
No, it's not valid. I mean, look, what people need to realize is that 90% of what Republicans spew in involving voting rights in courts are not valid, right? They are the fevered hopes and dreams of a political party that no longer can compete for people's vote. So they are engaged in making it harder to vote and easier to cheat. The other 10% is oftentimes where the action is, but no, the plaintiffs here don't have standing because, as the lower court said, you can't just say, because I am a member of the legislature, I am here to vindicate the rights of the legislature. I mean, if the legislature wants to vindicate its rights, it knows how to do that, right? It can hire a lawyer to represent the legislature. Just like there are cases in which, you see individual members of Congress bring lawsuits, or you see Congress as a whole in rare instances get involved in litigation. So no, I don't think they have standing. This question of who speaks for the state has actually come up before, and there are some thorny issues where there's like divided government. But in this instance, as the lower court pointed out, none of the branches of the Pennsylvania government, neither houses of the legislature, are involved in this case.
What is the danger of this particular lawsuit? What are the risks of state lawmakers challenging executive actions like this?
Look, the dangers of this lawsuit are the flip side of what the Republicans are trying to do, right? They don't really care, I don't think, that President Biden has told the executive agencies to help people to register to vote, because the federal government agencies were already complying with federal law that requires them to help people to vote. And I don't even think that they so much care, although they probably care more about what Governor Shapiro did in terms of automatic voter registration at DMVs. But what they are trying to do is to find the right test case to bring to the U.S. Supreme Court, so the Supreme Court adopts this fringe theory, right? This is more, from their standpoint, about getting their foot in the door, right? They were unable to win this case in Moore v. Harper, where they claimed state courts didn't have a role. Now they're trying to argue, well, maybe it's that governors and presidents don't have a role. In the Michigan case, which I referenced before, they're trying to argue, well, it's that the people of the state through ballot issues don't have a role. So they're trying to get, some number, a majority of the justices on the Supreme Court to bite on opening the door to stripping away protections from voting rights for voters. And that's, I think, what they're trying to do here.
Mark, if the Supreme Court grants them standing and says that they can sue, what happens next? Do you think that challenges like this would stay in Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina, or would it become more of a nationwide problem?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think on the standing question specifically, I think that the courts are going to be reticent to give them what they want, in part, Paige, for the reason you are anticipating, which is that, standing doctrine plays two roles. The one that the Constitution says it plays, which is that it limits the courts to only hearing actual cases and controversies, right? The federal courts are courts of limited jurisdiction. So you can't just ask an interesting question of a court, you have to have actual skin in the game. So number one, if they were to prevail on this standing, it would open up more challenges from state legislators who disagreed with with how the law in their state was being executed. But that brings me to the second problem here, which is that, I don't think the Supreme Court is going to want individual legislators around the country on any side of any issue to be able to basically show up at the doorstep and say, you know what, I don't think my governor is applying the law the way I voted for it, and so now I want to bring a lawsuit. It would dramatically expand standing doctrine in this case, in this country, at a time that I actually don't think even the conservatives on the Supreme Court are looking to open up that particular floodgate. I think that conservatives who want to attack voting rights, conservative justices who want to allow more attacks on voting rights, I think that they figure these cases can be brought by other plaintiffs that have standing, that they don't need to open the floodgates to every random legislator. So to anticipate kind of, where do we think this goes? I think the Republicans lose. Thanks for watching. Make sure you are staying informed on the latest voting rights and democracy news by subscribing to our daily and weekly newsletters at the link above. Today's episode was produced and edited by Ali Rothenberg, Gabby Corporal, and Paige Moskowitz, and is a production of Democracy Docket LLC.